15 years ago with one of my CIA classmates. We were all in the career trainee program together, and his job for most of his career, he's now retired, but for most of his career, he was responsible for recruiting and running Iranian assets, agents, people who were Iranian that worked in various parts of the Iranian government that were providing intelligence to the United States. And my friend told me very clearly, he says, Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon. You referenced the failed authorized by George W. Bush, I think carried out under Barack Obama, that got out of control. It did temporarily take down some of Iran's uh, the machines that were used to enrich uranium, uh, but they quickly got those back online. And so what happened out of that is actually Iran's ability to produce uranium increased despite that attack.
Wow.
Uh, the notion that the United States can attack and destroy these assets in Iran, uh, they've watched too many of the Tom Clancy movies or the Tom Cruise movies. Take your pick.
Right, the
Yes, that
latest Top
was
Gun.
literally part of the plot
Yeah,
of
they
the
didn't even
latest.
say Iran in the
Yeah,
movie, but that was literally the plot of the latest Top Gun movie, right?
Not to give anything away.
yeah, and
No
just
spoilers.
yeah, and it's just, I mean, it's entertaining. I know people love, have gone, oh, it's a great movie, it's well made, fine, but it's ridiculous. Understand how big Iran compared to Iraq. I mean, we struggled in Iraq. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq, and unlike Iran has mountains, and a lot of the factories and the enrichment places that we'd be looking for that are not disclosed, that are classified, those are in mountain valleys. So they're not easy to attack. And and then you get into this the issue of how do you get your forces on scene,
Right.
because we don't have air bases now that are sitting in Iraq or in Turkey for that matter, and that neither country is likely going to allow us to launch a military operation from there. So
Yeah.
then you're left with aircraft carriers, except if you put aircraft carriers into the Persian Gulf to try to do this, I wouldn't put it past Russia that Russia, as a consequence of the United States providing HIMARS that are being used to kill civilians in the Donetsk and in Russia, that Russia will supply
Hmm.
hypersonic missiles to the Iranians, and Iran could use a hypersonic missile on a U.S. aircraft carrier group, and there's not a damn thing the captain of that aircraft carrier can do to stop that attack.
Wow.
So then what is this posturing then, right? Because Iran is saying, well, we
It's,
will agree to this nuclear deal if you declassify the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group. So once we get
yeah.
this reclassification, we'll be pretty good and we're ready to renegotiating. So is that just all talk, or is there something there that we don't understand?
Well, it's again, just you guys have dealt with Hollywood. When you go out to Hollywood and you try to pitch a story, their their question is always, well, who's the villain? So you got to have a great villain. As long
Hmm.
as you got a good villain that you can riff off of, then you can justify a whole lot of things. Well, the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, villain. Iran has been a very convenient villain, and we like to portray them as the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. It's simply not true. Uh,
Right.
when you look at what Iran has done they've done targeted assassinations against Iranian dissidents. That was their big thing. They got out of the widespread terrorism business in the 1980s. What's really fascinating is when you look at the number of Iranian scientists, nuclear scientists, that have been assassinated in Iran, and those assassinations have been carried out with the help of Western intelligence and Israeli intelligence.
I was just about
Now,
to ask you the
imagine,
Israel connection on that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, no, and I understand why Israel's doing it. I mean, this is, intelligence organizations. They define who their enemies are and they go after them. But can you imagine the reaction that would take place in the United States if Iran hired a group that were going out, taking out our top scientists that were working on nuclear weapons and or cruise missile technology? Oh my God, there would be a terrible uproar. Well, when Iran reacts to that, they're a terrorist. When we react to that, we're on the side of God and the angels. And it's just, the hypocrisy of it stinks. The reality is, um, Iran they are a religious extremist country, and Obama completely dropped the ball with them in terms of trying to press for a deal where they would recognize Israel. And people say, oh, that's impossible. Well, they used to say it was impossible to have any reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Donald Trump managed to pull that off. So there is, when you refuse to pursue some of those leads, then you leave yourself with this so-called option of, oh yeah, we're going to punish Iran. The other thing Iran has is they've got the S-400, the Russian S-400 anti-air defense system. They will shoot down stealth planes of the United States if the United States or Israel deigned to try to attack targets inside Iran. And, again, people watch too many of the Tom Cruise movies and think that we just through some nifty piloting can escape those things. And, there's a rude awakening when he gets shot down.
So there's a couple of pieces I wanted to say. So that's the Iran piece of this,
yes,
right? Then we have the Russia piece. Then we'll get to the China piece in a second to round out the triumvirate here. But this was a question he was asked yesterday in Israel about Russia and how long we plan to be in Ukraine funneling weapons and money into that country. Listen.
Is this going to last? How long is this onslaught going to last?
As long as it's going to take. When we're there till it takes whatever time it takes. We cannot let them prevail.
It can take months. It can take years.
It could.
Mm-hmm. You think the war could take years to 10?
No, you said that.
Yeah,
you said it could, okay?
It could.
No, it could.
Yeah, you said it could, and I'm saying it could, but you said it. No, you said it, I said it. I said it could, you could. Man, this is the leader of the free world.
Well, I thought that was actually...
But
I was like, we're not really expecting him to be quite so fast on the uptake. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, no, you said you could. But then, in the weeks beforehand, Larry, of course, he said multiple times, as long as it takes, right? So, and that Russia has threatened now with these long-range weapons entering into Ukraine, right? The HIMARS, the long-range weapons. Yesterday, Russia issuing a warning saying, hey, if any of these, we're worried about these long-range weapons now hitting nuclear reactors inside of Russia. So that's the Russian piece of this. Your thoughts on that, like how long this goes on and what is the end game here?
Well, tomorrow they're going to have a special session of the Russian legislature with Vladimir Putin. And reportedly, Putin's going to ask for authorization to extend the special military operation outside of Ukraine and to go after terrorist targets. United States target, make it possible to start targeting NATO countries as well. So tomorrow is going to be pretty significant because Vladimir Putin doesn't bluff on this, but he's following the law and doing it very measured. As far as the ability of Ukraine to continue to fight, I mean, people got to stop smoking whatever it is they're smoking. If it's heroin or methamphetamine, because the delusion that is prevalent right now in the West is bizarre. Russia has destroyed roughly 80% of all vehicles, tanks, aircraft of Ukraine.
Wow.
Von Clausewitz, in his writings on war, described something he called the culminating point. The culminating point was basically when the military ceased being able to operate. That is the status right now of the Ukrainian military. They can't organize, let's say, a tank battalion or a tank regiment because they don't have enough tanks. And they don't have enough trained people to drive the tanks because they have been killed. And it takes a while to train new ones. But just 2 days ago, or I guess yesterday, Wednesday, outside of Kherson, they the Ukrainians tried to mount an offensive, an attack on Kherson. And there's a great video out. You can see three lines, three columns of what is left of Ukrainian vehicles. The Russians literally shelled it. All you see is a long line of cloud and smoke where they've blown up the cars, trucks, and tanks that remain. So the West cannot supply that stuff fast enough. Almost as soon as they get it in, Russia's destroying it. And it's getting easier for Russia, not harder. The reason it's getting easier is that at the outset of the war, February 24th, yes, there were thousands and thousands of planes. So they had a lot of targets, but they were scattered all over. So trying to find them was difficult. Now, very, very few. And so they can focus in on tracking communications between both command headquarters and field units, as well as factories that are being used to try to repair some of this. And what's really fascinating is if you take time to look at the Ministry of Defense briefing by Russia, you'll see that they withhold a lot of information. But the key to their strategy is they are targeting command centers in the field. So far, they haven't hit Kiev, but they're targeting these command centers in the field, essentially decapitating these units, which is why then the specific units that are deployed forward complain about not getting any guidance.
Oh, I see.
They've had their
Interesting.
command leadership. So it's just
Yeah.
the notion that the United States can do this. Biden's delusional. The way I look at it right now, I'll be shocked if Ukraine's able to mount any kind of. Number one, they have not mounted a credible threat in 5 months. Go back to the end of February, so over 4 months. And what I mean by that, where they've put together an organized force, they've been supported by fixed wing aircraft or rotary wing aircraft, they've got tanks, got artillery, got organized formations of soldiers, and they attack a Russian stronghold or a point that Russia and they overrun it, they push the Russians out, and then they hold it. They haven't done that. Not once. Not once since February 24th. Somebody ought to wake and recognize what this is. This notion that they're going to put together a 1,000,000-man army to come down and push the Russians out of the southern coast. There's going to be a cavalry of unicorns before you see them.
Right. And so that's why this constant begging for more resources, right? And so the West can sort of say, well, we're really doing all we can instead of really feeling like, well, we're kind of dumping money and weaponry down into a lost cause and that it will reverberate.
Oh, it's making the organized criminals in Ukraine very happy. I mean, they're making money off of the humanitarian aid and off the military
Yes.
equipment, and it's
Yeah.
getting sold on the black market. This part of the issue is it's not just that the Russians have destroyed the equipment; they've also destroyed some of the best trained soldiers that, frankly, NATO spent 8 years training and equipping. They're dead, or captured, or incapacitated because of wounds.
Wow.
So where do you get new soldiers? Well, you go out and try to round them up, and when when you look at what the Ukrainian police are having to do to try to get people to serve them with their enlistment papers, it's sort of like, I guess, that scene out of City Slickers where they're trying to herd cattle and the
Right.
cattle are running every different direction.
Yeah.
That's sort of what's going on in the Ukraine right now.
These are lives we're talking about, right? These are people who were
Yes,
trained for
yes.
battle, and lives are not expendable. So when we think in the West that we should just open our checkbooks and send money and weaponry, we have to ask ourselves, even if we really believe what the media is telling us, that Ukraine has a chance, that we have to ideologically stand up to Russia, if we believe that, that's fine. But if we continue to send money to prolong this war, that means more people will die because we're prolonging an inevitability,
Yeah.
right? So we have to ask ourselves
Yes.
that when you fly your Ukraine flag, is this a way that we're prolonging suffering?
That's right.
But
And
we're not only that,
yeah,
but the other thing that's happening to be aware of is by introducing these advanced weapon systems like HIMARS, it's a multiple launch rocket system. By putting that in place, and it's hitting not military targets, but it's hitting civilian targets and both the Donbass and into Russia. At that point, Russia will retaliate against the United States. That retaliation against U.S. targets is coming, and at that point, the U.S. is going to face a choice. They're going to try to, if they try to respond in a conventional manner, we're going to get our ass kicked.
well,
Period.
that's the qu-
We're going to get shot down.
And that's the question I have, Larry, because we just had a question from one of our viewers in the chat. Last night we talked about that New York City amazing public service announcement about a nuclear attack on Manhattan.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and we've heard warnings, right? Sergei Lavrov, we've heard it from Putin. We've talked about the threat of a nuclear strike on the United States. And someone just wrote in the chat, they're terrified of this, like literally terrified of a dirty bomb. And we've heard rumors of this. There's been reports of this around New York City and so forth. Can you speak to that in your expertise about from an intelligence perspective?
Hey, I'm Joey, and I'm one of the 30 AI voices from Speechlo. You listened to this video until now and you probably couldn't tell I'm not a real human voice. That's because I understand exactly what each phrase is saying, and I know how to put inflections in my voice, just like a real human would do. With Speechlo you can generate as many voiceovers as you want with only 3 clicks.
Well, it is Russia now, for really the first time in history, has a clear advantage where if they decided to launch a nuclear attack against the United States would not be able to respond. Sure, we might get some launches off against Russia, but what Russia has put in place with its anti-missile air defense systems, the S-500 and the S-550, which is supposed to come online soon, they're literally in a position that they can shoot down our nuclear weapons. So our nuclear weapons would not hit the targets in Russia, but Russia's weapons would certainly hit targets in the United States. So the United States would be taken out. I think that remains a very, the ultimate last resort. I think there are other measures that Russia could take in the interim. Knock out all of U.S. satellites over, for starters. Russia is in a far better position to conduct the elimination of U.S. communication satellites, U.S. spy satellites, literally blind us. So we would have no idea what's going on, and we'd have no ability to communicate internally. And internet would go down. The United States would be basically back in the 19th century. So, and people say, oh, no, Russia. We keep forgetting that for, about 10 years, Russia was playing our Uber driver, taking us to the space station because we couldn't build and still cannot build the rockets. The one rockets that we're, quote, relying on are being built by Elon Musk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The government. It's not being built by NASA. So this aspect of how space could enter in as a component in the warfare is, something I don't think a lot of people have seriously considered.
Well, we've talked about it here on the show, and I make a fun of it, but I also point out that this whole Space Force idea, like there's legitimacy behind this idea, right? Now
Right.
we have it was we talk about it as we want to explore the stars, but it's really another branch of the military. And as we look at China, Philip, if you want to take my my laptop here, so we got this news overnight: U.S. sends destroyer near these islands near in the South China Sea. China calls it illegal. USS battleship USS Benfold traveled near the archipelago of more than 100 reefs. This on top of the news that we just got from Kamala Harris weighing in and announcing 2 new embassies in Tonga and Kiribati in a push into Vanuatu, into that whole area, into Fiji. So it's all about just friendship, right? Right, Larry?
Right. What are they calling it? A freedom. What did they say? It's a freedom.
It's a freedom something. It's a freedom sandwich. It's a freedom.
Like it was a freedom. Go back to that. It was
Flotilla.
Freedom.
China
the
says
other
it's
story.
illegal.
I'm sorry.
No, about the pleasure cruise.
The pleasure cruise.
That China says, it's a freedom of navigation operation. The U.S. says.
Oh, a freedom of navigation operation. That's all it is, Larry.
That was necessary to assert rights and freedoms under international law in disputed waters. So those are clear fighting words that this is a contested area and we are here to contest.
Of the three conflicts that you outlined at the start, Iran, Ukraine, and China, the one that is actually currently the most dangerous and the most likely to touch off the exchange of fire is in China. The commander of the Pacific Command, it's called PACOM in military jargon. I've heard expressions from other officers who are familiar with that, with him and his actions. They consider him extremely reckless and dangerous, that he is taking steps that are deliberately trying to provoke the Chinese. And again, this is one of those cases where the United States is failing to consider the fact that China does have hypersonic weapons. Hypersonic weapons can destroy U.S. ships. That means our U.S. ships dare not get within 1,000, 2,000 miles of China once they get. And I do not dismiss this as something that's highly unlikely. I think, in fact, it's highly likely because the belligerence of the United States in its demands and commands to China, what China must do, have been pushed back on sharply by both the foreign minister, by the president of China, and by the minister of defense of China. I mean, they're not taking any crap off of the United States. And so every one of these moves that we think, we're showing the flag and we're showing freedom of navigation, Chinese, they're patient, but I think these times we're going to cross that barrier and cross the red line, so to speak, and the Chinese will retaliate. And when they retaliate, they will sink one or two U.S. naval ships, at which point the United States is going to have to figure out, what do we do to respond? Well, if you respond by trying to send an aircraft carrier group towards your shores, they've got hypersonic missiles, and they will destroy those aircraft carrier groups. So all of a sudden, then what do? We leave ourselves no other choice but to go nuclear. And then at that point, Russia weighs in as well. Said, no. You do this, you're gonna eliminate yourself. China does not have as robust or advanced missile defense system as does Russia. So Russia actually remains all of this, even though China is much larger, economy is much larger. Russia actually holds a lot of the cards.
Our guest is ex-CIA analyst Larry Johnson. You can find him over at sonar21.com. He's joining us for the hour here to talk about a lot of the big stories. We've got a big story we're going to talk about next about the CIA and a conviction there. We're going to also talk about the January 6th hearings, some really interesting story that no one's talking about on the January 6th hearings. We'll talk about all of that. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Goldco, because if you have an IRA, you have a 401k or a savings account, things are scary out there. The Biden administration has already printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined.
Starting a business is exciting, but it can be stressful. You've got so many hurdles to get over all the time. But when you get your business online with GoDaddy, you'll get all the support you need. Domain name, e-commerce, web security, SEO, whatever it is you may need help with, we'll guide you through it at any time. Just reach out to us on our 24/7 support line or through WhatsApp, and a GoDaddy guide will help you. For all the help and tools you need to grow online, GoDaddy.
Henny is looking for the perfect domain name deal. That's why she needs Namecheap. There are hundreds of domain extensions available, spanning all types of interests and industries, all at great prices. With 2 months of free private email, free privacy protection for life, and
national debt hit a record $30 trillion, and inflation is the highest we've seen since 1981. Well, those are all good numbers, right? And by the way, the Biden administration continues to blame Russia and Republicans for this inflation. So it's only a matter of time before the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have a retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk right now. Talk to my friends over at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement with actual precious metals, gold and silver, before it's too late. You know that I'm a gold bug. I've been talking about gold and silver on this show for many, many years. It is the one thing that has sustained for thousands of years through all sorts of famine, turmoil. It is precious metals. So go to redactedlikesgold.com. They will give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account. That's redactedlikesgold.com. And my friends at Goldco are actually going to give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account. So our guest for the full hour is ex-CIA analyst Larry Johnson. He's a great mind on all things geopolitical and the deep state, the deep machinations of this federal government, and a big story on a CIA conviction that we want to get his take on.
So on Wednesday, a former CIA engineer was convicted on 9 counts of a case that accused him of stealing classified government information. The classified information was called Vault 7, and I want to discuss it for a few reasons. One, the case is strange because it sort of shoots some holes in how airtight the CIA can be and how dependent they are on basically human behavior.
Larry's laughing
right?
about the airtightness of it. We'll get to that in a second.
But also there's this idea that Vault 7 exists, that the United States government has the tools to reach as far as it wants into your digital life. So let me introduce you to the case a little bit, and then we'll get your take on it. So the person who was convicted is named Joshua Schultz. He worked inside the Operations Support Branch, or OSB unit at the CIA. His nickname there was Badass and Voldemort because he had a shaved head like the Harry Potter villain. Now, most of the engineers had nicknames, though, inside his unit, so that's not in and of itself quite so incriminating. One guy who got braces as an adult was called Train Tracks. The OSB is a physical hacking unit, though. It's when someone wants to hack into your life and they send out, say, a plumber to your house, right, who then puts something on your hard drive while you're going to the bathroom or something like that, right? It's that type of thing. They will always deny that they do it, that their sort of modus operandi is plausible deniability. Well, until Vault 7 was published on WikiLeaks. So what is Vault 7? According to Nicole Perlroth's book, it is like an instruction manual for how the CIA can hack into cars, smart TVs, web browsers, the operating systems of Android, Apple, and Windows, Mac, and Linux, basically the motherlode. It's like, oh, we want to get into you. That guy has this. This is how we do it, right? Vault 7 was published on WikiLeaks on March 7th of 2017, but the CIA didn't know it, actually, that it had been published for a year until WikiLeaks, or it had been hacked, but they didn't know it until WikiLeaks published it, which is interesting. Now, this is in the wake of many leaks from a group called Shadow Brokers. And so initially the CIA thought this was the work of shadow brokers, but shadow brokers didn't take the credit. So Vault 7 not only showed the public what the CIA was doing, it showed them the targets. And so say one target could figure out what the CIA had on their phone, right? The thing is, this was not on a public network, and it was only hosted inside the CIA's network. So the CIA believed that this was an inside job. Now, by the time they figured this out, this guy Schultz was already working for Bloomberg in New York City in the private sector. He had had a very long and drawn out personnel battle with someone inside the CIA where like he was shooting him with Nerf guns. The guy didn't like it. He said threatening things. It seems very juvenile, but it went all the way to the fact that Schultz filed a restraining order with the courts against this person. And this was not supposed to happen. In the CIA, things are supposed to just stay inside the CIA. You should not take this public. Am I right, Larry? Do you want to bring in on that before we keep going? That like
Well,
this guy doing this, going into the court system against his CIA coworker was already strange.
well, Schultz, I think, illustrates, if I'm not mistaken, he was a contractor. He was not a full-time blue badge. You know, they call them blue badgers. Blue badgers are people who are actually full-time CIA employees and are part of the CIA organization and will retire with a CIA pension if they somehow manage to stick around for 20 years. What has happened, particularly since 9/11, is a lot of the intelligence activities were contracted out to subcontractors, uh, just like Edward Snowden. Snowden worked for the agency for a while, and then Snowden was actually working as a contractor. But as a contractor, you will hold top secret compartmented clearances and what they call SAP clearances, special access programs. So those are even beyond top secret. It's inclusive. So what Schultz was working on was clearly a SAP, and the SAPs are controlled from the standpoint you have to sign in, be read into them, sign it, and then when they end the SAP, sometimes you have to sign out. Uh, the fact that he got away with carrying this out, and he tried to portray himself as a whistleblower. Uh, I don't think he was a whistleblower. He was vindictive. He was very self-centered. The allegation that he also had child pornography on his computer. I don't know if the FBI planted that. I wouldn't put it beyond the FBI to do that, or if it was legitimate on his part.
Well, let me just
Regardless,
ring in on that
he's got
part
bigger problems
because
on that. Yeah.
yes, so that is actually what they picked him up for, right? So they went and searched his computers, and they raided his home, and they found a server. Basically, he had been hosting a server inside of his computer, but he was kind of dumb enough to keep the passwords on his phone, which they also had. So they were able to get into that server, and they found child pornography. And he says he was hosting it on a public server for like his high school buddies, right? But then separately,
Jeez.
they also found a photograph of a woman in a bathroom at the CIA who was his roommate. And she appears to be unconscious. And in the photograph, he's touching her inappropriately. And this is how he was also charged with sexual assault. And the woman says, I don't remember taking this. Clearly, this was not consensual. So these two pieces, whether or not, I mean, it doesn't seem very plausible that the government could plant at least the second one, right? Are something
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
government has said that it will put on the back burner while it tries the Vault 7 case. And he still does have to try those sexual assault and pornography cases. He says if the CIA goes ahead with this, though, he's going to expose the CIA for all kinds of nefarious things, right? So, but so yes, the pieces about sort of the unsavoriness of his character exist. He is not. He had posted on Twitter that he is anti-Snowden, anti-Chelsea Manning. He thought both of those people should be severely punished. He's not an idealist like this. So, but is he somebody who? But he knew that Vault 7 would embarrass the government. So one of my questions is, why
Right.
hasn't it really caused the outrage that the Snowden documents did?
Well, because do you remember that, we talked about a little earlier without naming it, Stuxnet. So the
Yes.
Stuxnet virus was produced initially by the United States. It was unleashed on Iran by the Israelis without, giving the United States an advance warning. And then it got out of control and actually went around the world and shut down a lot of businesses and such. So the idea, all Vault 7 proved was what was already established, which is the United States has got major software for hacking foreign computers and doing it in a variety of ways. So that was not as um, stunning Snowden provided, which was that, in fact, the U.S. government is actively spying on Americans and invading your privacy across the board. Uh, what is interesting is that WikiLeaks did not publish the full, they kept some control over what was released. They showed the general categories of what the CIA was doing with these hacker tools, but they didn't actually release the code so it could be used. So they showed some journalistic responsibility in that case. But this guy Schultz, let's call him an accidental whistleblower. I don't know if he sent the stuff initially to WikiLeaks for a vendetta or to get paid.
But there was
Or,
never any communication between him and WikiLeaks. It does, but WikiLeaks actually had a backup that he had done. So it's like the
Right.
forensics of it is still a little bit strange. But then also the fact that the CIA knew that this guy was volatile, that he was, having this strange vendetta against a coworker. I guess I'm asking, how common is that there's just like personnel issues that blow up and then actually have national security implications?
Not only is it very common, I think it's probably worse now than it's ever been in the history of the CIA. I mean, go back to Robert Ames, who was discovered in around 1990, 92.
Right.
He was spying for the then Soviet Union uh, and had given quite a bit of damning information. Uh, he had all the warning signs back then in terms of uh, having too much money for his income level, extravagant lifestyle, living, wearing Italian suits, a variety of things. Eh, Nobody picked up on it until after the damage was already done. Now, what you've created in CIA is they're so focused upon having, the right pronouns and the multiple mixes of genders and different shades of hair color that little attention's paid to actual whether lifestyle creates some vulnerabilities that could be exploited by foreign intelligence services. I guarantee you right now, whether I'm, Russian, Israeli, French, British, God, I couldn't wait to work against U.S. intelligence targets because they're going to be so much easier to recruit now than it was the case during the Cold War.
Yeah.
Our guest is Larry Johnson, ex-CIA analyst. Any final questions on this story? I mean, I think the CIA, the Mike Pompeo angle of the Vault 7 thing is really interesting, right? I mean, this is exactly what
Yes.
what Julian Assange's wife has said, that Mike Pompeo, who was then CIA director at the time of the leak, instructed the CIA to assassinate Julian Assange in response to the Vault 7 story. Can you speak to that at all, Larry?
I don't know if he actually issued that because it violates the executive orders 12333, is it? And 12345. There are two executive orders that were issued back in the days of Ronald Reagan, specifically banning assassinations. But the anger at Julian Assange is so misplaced. Uh, Julian Assange uh, he may be a jerk in the views of some people, but he's done legitimate journalism. And the reason the United States is so angry at him is he's exposed a lot of very ugly things that the United States has done.
Yes.
And it's just the inconvenient truth. That's the real inconvenient truth here, is that the lies that were sold to the American people about why we went to war in Iraq, why we went to war in Afghanistan, or expanded the war in Afghanistan, didn't take care of bin Laden, whole variety of things. Julian Assange has exposed that. And Assange, as well, some of the WikiLeaks material exposes the fact that Russia had been communicating with the United States for quite a while about how it would react if the West persisted in trying to bring Ukraine into NATO.
Our guest is Larry Johnson, ex-CIA analyst. You can find him over at sonar21.com, where he does great writing there on currently what's happening in Ukraine and around the world, geopolitics as well as intelligence. So great to have Larry here on the show. We've got more news to get to here on the show coming up. We're going to talk about the January 6th hearings and some startling revelations from AOC, actually. I mean, actually surprising comments from her about one big question that hasn't been answered and hasn't been covered during these January 6th hearings. Why were people letting people in the door? Hey, come on in. Come on in. And where are those police officers?
Yeah, we forgot all about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, right? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk more with Larry about Ambassador Bolton's comments yesterday on coup attempts around the world. And we're going to talk about this new variant that the mainstream media is pushing as hard as they can ahead of the midterm elections. So before we get there, we're going to tell you about Anthem Software. Do you own a small business and need help growing it? Then AnthemSoftware.com is your one-stop solution. Anthem Software helps small businesses all over America find, serve, and keep more customers profitably by providing world-class CRM software and results-focused marketing services that your business will allow. It allows your business to not only grow, but analyst Larry Johnson is joining us right now to talk about this. Larry, what's your take on that? Why?
High quality music and sound effects that you can actually afford? Call 911. I'm on fire. Create amazing videos with unlimited music.
Why has this question not come up during the hearings?
It's real simple. If they dig into it, they're going to discover that the entire thing was a setup that was encouraged by the FBI. I mean, Ray Epps is the number one case in point. He's the poster child for this. Former, retired member of the Marine Corps, lives, I believe, in Arizona. They've got him on video, repeatedly on video, not just once, but multiple times, inciting the crowd, telling the crowd they needed to go into the Capitol, they needed to attack the Capitol.
Right.
And so when you've got someone like that who's out openly saying it, and then what has happened to him? Nothing. They put a 69-year-old grandmother with cancer into prison for 60 days just because she walked in the Capitol. But Ray Epps, who was literally encouraging and they got one scene of him at one of the police barriers where he's whispering in the ear of someone, and then the kid then goes and actually attacks those police, and they get through there with force. But Epps should have been picked up, arrested, and charged if this was in fact, if he was acting on his own. But he was not acting on his own. There is other ample evidence that there were undercover operatives placed in the crowd to try to incite and create this incident. What is fascinating too is the fact that you do have on the multiple videotapes where the police just have these people come in. They don't try at all to resist them. And the one guy, he's from my neck of the woods here in Florida, Jason, the buffalo, the guy wearing the buffalo headdress with the horns. When he comes strolling into the House chamber, there's a police officer, Capitol police officer with him. Just they're having sort of a pleasant chat, and the guy's just keeping tabs, make sure nobody does anything destructive. Despite the meme that the Democrats have tried to present, and some Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, that this was a violent crowd. It was not a violent crowd. They didn't kill anybody. The only person actually murdered that day was Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran who was shot by a Capitol Hill policeman. And I'm a certified firearms instructor. That guy is a clown. He should never have a in his hands. You don't pull a gun and point it at somebody that is not posing a direct threat, an imminent threat to your life. Ashley Babbitt did not have a weapon in her hand. She had no means of causing him physical harm, yet he pulls a live firearm, points it at her, shoots her.
Yeah, through a wall, through a window, through a wall, through a barricade.
Through a window. She'd come through the window there.
Yeah.
I thought there was an officer who was suffocated and beaten.
That happened.
Actually, the officer, one of them had a stroke. He died 2 days later. It was natural causes. And none of the officers that claimed that they were attacked or suffocated, in fact, were by the protesters. That was just, in fact, there's other video that's emerged, and Gateway Pundit's done a good job of publishing a lot of this, that shows the police. There's another woman, I think her name is Rachel. She was physically beaten and she died. But they show them before the Capitol cops surrounding her and just clubbing her, and then she suffered a heart attack and died.
So the Capitol Police question, Larry. I mean, she brings that up. She says, for us to just like throw money at that, like that's going to solve the problem.
Right.
It's a good question, right? I mean, so if you just like throw money at the Capitol Police problem, is that going to solve what actually happened that day? People who were like letting people in different doors, pulling back barricades?
Well, remember, Donald Trump contacted Nancy Pelosi and he said he was willing to send the National Guard there. Pelosi turned him down. She didn't want the National Guard up on Capitol Hill. I mean, that's a fact. So the fact that the Democrat leadership deliberately shied away from taking measures to defend the Capitol, gives more credence to the suggestion that they were complicit, at least in some measure, in allowing that to happen. It's not clear to what extent they were actively cooperating with the FBI and the Department of Justice. What we do know is that the intelligence warning that was passed to the Capitol Hill police made it very explicit that they expected the possibility of trouble the next day and that precautions should have been taken and were not.
Yeah, that's
well, and
at the
I
heart
don't
of
know
it.
if you remember, Clayton, I don't know if it was like the following day or whatever, but I was skeptical when I was like, how did they get like Time magazine quality photos of these people inside? Like, it was like they were perfectly posed with the flag out. And I was like, that alone made me skeptical.
Well, you had the photographers right alongside of them. They were standing side by side, walking right in. We saw the video, of course, of the Capitol Police taking selfies with some of them and, giving fist bumps and stuff as they were going in. And to Larry's point, they had this intelligence ahead of time, and they didn't do anything to stop it.
So, I mean, the social media framing of this is that those were just Trump supporters who were sympathetic to the cause of overturning the election, when in fact, what you are suggesting here is that it was more inside than just some sort of people expressing their politics who worked for the Capitol Police.
And what about the pipe bomb side of this, Larry? Like, what about that angle? Where's the discussion about that?
That has gone away. We don't know who did it. They had some good film coverage of it, video coverage.
Right.
It was planted, I believe, at the DNC headquarters, which is just what is that? East of the Capitol, east of the House office buildings. So that they've got the clear video of this guy and on a cell phone. The FBI and the Capitol Police, they all have the capability to gather phone records and then through triangulation figure out who is making calls at that time in that area. Now, if they've done that, they haven't released the results, but they certainly should have been able to find out who was calling and who that person was. And they're either hiding it deliberately or they didn't do the work.
I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy around this, obviously, the focus on this and the fact that we still have not really had much discussion and we have not had condemnation from the White House on assassination attempts towards Supreme Court justices. And so, and the massive dragnet that unfolded after January 6th, as you mentioned, arresting grandmothers and so forth. And yet we still don't know about the pipe bomb question. We still don't know about like the Capitol Police involvement in this, or the other police involvement, law enforcement involvement in it, and yet we have people showing up to Supreme Court justices' homes, and there's been no condemnation from the White House on this.
Well, and apart from the fact that many that literally they so-called trespassed on the people's house. How can people who are American citizens trespass on a house that is theirs? That's question number one. But more importantly, they've been held in prison without bond, some for more than a year and a half. This is the kind of treatment that the Soviets used to do to Jewish dissidents in the Soviet Union, and would hold them without charge, hold them in the prisons, in the gulags. Now I've lived long enough to see the United States behaving like the old Soviet state, where we've got political prisoners. In fact, we have more political prisoners now in the United States than Russia holds. Russia has a total of 303. They're holding over 700 people just from this January 6th incident. And none of them killed, struck, or hit police. They went in, they trespassed on the building. It's just what's happened.
Yeah. Well, our guest is ex-CIA analyst Larry Johnson. We've got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about what's happening with Ambassador John Bolton and the fallout from his comments on these coups around the world. We'll get there. We're also going to talk about this new Ninja variant. But first, you want to tell us about our friends over at Audible?
Sure. So it is road trip season. You may know this already. And perhaps you are looking for a way to pass the time. I want to tell you about our friends over at Audible, because Audible is a great way to get some reading in for either entertainment purposes or research, or just to make you a little bit smarter. You know, when you're always on the go and you have time to listen to things, that's where Audible comes in. They offer an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. In fact, this weekend I'm taking a road trip with my mom, and I downloaded a classic Agatha Christie because I thought that maybe that would be fun for she and I. You'll discover exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio. As an Audible member, you can choose one title per month to keep from their entire catalog, including the bestsellers and new releases. All Audible members get access to a growing selection of audiobooks, Audible originals, and podcasts that are included with your membership. You can listen all you want and get more added every month. So let Audible help you discover new ways to laugh, be inspired, or entertained. New members can try it for free for 30 days if you visit audible.com/redacted or text the word redacted to 500-500. That's audible.com/redacted or text redacted to 500-500 to try Audible for free for 30 days. Once again, that's audible.com/redacted.
Well, let's talk about how the United States creates and tries to overthrow governments around the world, and has been doing that for decades. We are joined by ex-CIA analyst Larry Johnson, who knows a thing or two perhaps about government involvement in coup attempts around the world. And we want to get Larry's take on what Ambassador John Bolton had to say in an interview with Jake Tapper on CNN. Now, we talked a little bit about this last night, and I was actually pretty stunned when we did this story, because there was a good, healthy grouping of our audience that was actually stunned and surprised that a former ambassador was admitting that, yes, in fact, he was involved in assassination attempts and coup attempts of foreign leaders, as if the United States doesn't do this. A good portion of our audience, of course, was saying, where have you been living, under a rock? But I think we all have this sort of innocence about us where we like to believe the United States doesn't do this. And so when Ambassador Bolton said this, it all left us a little bit stunned. Watch.
I don't know that I agree with you, to be fair, with all due respect. One doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work, and that's not what he did. It was just stumbling around from one idea to another. Ultimately, he did unleash the rioters at the Capitol. As to that, there's no doubt.
Stop. Just give me 5 seconds, and I guarantee you will be shocked. Okay, so I will just stop talking right now. As you can see, my lips are not moving anymore. Because this was not my voice. This is a text-to-speech voice generated with Speechelo. Actually, 98% of the people hearing a voiceover generated.
So, oh yeah, I was actively involved in coups. And as we said last night, I do want to play the second part of this because Jake Tapper did follow up on this and did actually press him on this question. Wait a minute, you were actively involved in coups? Will you talk more about that? Here's what he had to say.
To anathematize the rest of the Republican Party, and that's unacceptable.
I do want to ask a follow-up. When we were talking about what is capable, what you need to do to be able to plan a coup, and you cited your expertise having planned coups.
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but
successful coups?
Well, I wrote about Venezuela in the book, and it turned out not to be successful. Not that we had all that much to do with it, but I saw what it took for an opposition to try and overturn an illegally elected president, and they failed. The notion that Donald Trump was half as competent as the Venezuelan opposition is laughable. But I think there's another...
I feel like there's other stuff you're not...
Yeah, there's some other stuff you're not telling us, he says. Yeah, there's some stuff I'm not telling you. So, Larry, when you watched those comments, what was your kind of initial thought on that? And then we'll kind of unpack what he's not telling us.
Bolton is a buffoon. I mean, he is a highly credentialed fool. This is, he thinks he did a great job with planning the coup in Venezuela that went nowhere and did nothing. Complete failure. There was a time when the CIA was actively involved in overthrowing governments. In the 1950s, overthrew the government of Arbenz and Guatemala, and overthrew the ruler of Iran, who was then replaced by the Shah of Iran. So in both cases, it was serving financial interests beneficial to the United States. The United States tried and failed repeated efforts to take out Fidel Castro and eliminate Cuba.
I hope that you are enjoying this one. It's Larry Johnson. He's been on the show many times. Will attempt again to try to show the Abe video I prepared. Looks like you can see I am at Yamato Site IG, where Abe was killed. Gonna walk over there. This is the north exit, which I will go around. I should have taken the south exit, but I didn't know until I got there. It's very close to our family. You just cross the street, walk half a block, and you will see where it all went down. Nara is a very, very peaceful place otherwise. That's why this was so shocking. Not only do assassinations and murders not happen much in Japan, they never happen in Nara. Here I am approaching the spot that many of you have seen filming Abe's last words. Right there. Here is the kill zone, Japan's Daily Plaza. That yellow line is about where Abe was standing. That's where the killer was. It's about 6 meters away. Between the bus station and where Abe was standing. Here again is where Abe was on the other side. That's where he is again. Even in 90-something degree heat, that's like 37, 38 Celsius, I think, people were lined up for blocks, standing there, waiting to give bouquets of flowers to the tables for Shinzo Abe. And this has been going on for days. All day. Any point in the day, you'll see them lined up giving flowers.
It is hot today too. They are standing in the heat for this. You notice there's like 100 people and no sound. So everyone's quiet. Usually I don't film people's faces, but they're all wearing masks, so it doesn't matter. Wow. Okay, this goes on.
I visited where Tetsuya worked and also where he bought some of his supplies. He got other supplies over the internet. But he worked a forklift. He had an older brother and a sister. He was really, really peeved that their mother had bankrupted his dead father's construction company and given all their money over to this religious cult.
This is the line to give flowers. Excuse me. And we're coming to go to the back.
There's the Daily Plaza. That's Japan's Daily Plaza right there. Yeah, I'm going back to Nara right now. Actually, I got some people to interview down there that knew Tetsuya, so I'll have some more information on that. Hope you enjoyed Larry Johnson. He'll be back on the show again, too. Find us on Rumble, VK, Odysee, and Bitchute. And there were no Shekelchats, I think. Yeah, so